Welcome everyone to the Friday mini concert here at noon at Chapin Jazz Studio. We have a couple of fun tunes for you today and an interview with Wren, which will be a lot of fun. And for those of you who were hoping to hear some shakuhachi flute, we're going to try that another time. Chris and I took a great run at that and didn't quite think it was ready, so we're gonna come back with that. But anyway, we're going to hear Chris a little bit later on a tune. And first up today is a song with Thomas Power. Those of you who have attended the art shows in Grays Lake have heard Thomas playing there. And Thomas has been a longtime friend of the Chapin Jazz Studio. He has been part of the summer workshops, and he has been a regular at our jam sessions, not just as a player, but really helping coach tunes and that sort of thing. He's a very wonderful mentor to other musicians. He's going to be a sophomore next year at Millikan University. And we're actually doing some piano work together this summer, but you're going to hear him on his main instrument, which is jazz guitar. And he chose to play Days of Wine and Roses. And we're doing an arrangement that was made popular by Bill Evans, where for those of you who are into music, he starts in the key of F and then he modulates to the key of A flat halfway through. And it kind of gives the song a special energy. So we're going to get into that right away. Let me get my music ready here, and you'll hear Thomas Power on guitar, and then I'm going to play live behind him. And then, of course, you hear some tracks behind that. All right. All right. Hey, let's hear it for Thomas on that great piece. I just played it beautifully. It was really fun to play with you, Thomas, and thanks so much for joining me on this for this concert. And look forward to doing more of that as we go along. So, very nice. All right. Our next tune is with guest artist Chris Wren. And Chris and I, of course, have played together quite a few years at the Lake House in Lake Bluff. I think we met first at a Jazz Wave concert over in Waukegan. And then also I've enjoyed playing with Chris in the College of Lake County Band. Chris chose this tune, and it's a beautiful ballad, but we've got some different feels happening within it. And so, without further ado, let's go into What's New with Chris Wren on sax. I'm going to be playing behind him on piano, and of course, we got some Apple Logic tracks that are helping us on drums and bass. Hey, welcome to the Friday concert. And so Chris has not actually heard the final product. He's been home recording kind of with a single note happening and maybe a backing track. But I think it came out pretty well, though, the total thing.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Yeah. Nice job on that track, Chris. It was really fun playing behind you. We haven't had a chance to do that for quite a while, so.
Yes, it ain't like the real thing, but it's it's cool.
Right. Yeah. It's not like the real thing. It's like we're making some lemonade here. But it has been really fun to get at least a little glimpse of the playing back here. So. So someone mentioned to me that it was kind of ironic that the last concert we played House Wren, and then today we have Chris Wren here, and he didn't play on House Wren, so we'll have to resolve that at some point too.
Or maybe write a Cactus Wren tune or
There we go. We've got other options, definitely. So Chris, one thing that we had some photos playing behind the last tune, and we saw some photos of the shakuhachi flute that we were kind of working on for the loon tune. And I wondered if you could just talk about how you got started with the shakuhachi flute and that sort of thing.
yeah, sure. The first time I heard the shakuhachi flute was on a 1964 album by a jazz clarinetist by the name of Tony Scott. Um, and there was a lot of cross pollination during the 60s of music. It was, I don't know, kind of the beginning of world music or something. And so this album was a collaboration with Hosan Yamamoto on shakuhachi and also a koto player. And, I was kind of interested in Zen and meditation and stuff, and I got this album, and it was, it's the first time I had heard shakuhachi, and it really resonated with me, and I, my interest went from there. It planted the seed, and, you know, from there, I, you know, developed interest, started listening to, you know, Japanese music, um, started studying the shakuhachi. Um, and in fact, uh, what, a decade ago, I was doing Skype lessons with my shakuhachi teacher. So I have kind of uh, what, a history of doing online lessons before our current situation.
Cool. And was the shakuhachi teacher in Japan?
Actually, no, he was in Ohio at the time. Uh, Michael Gould. Uh, he was either the first or one of the first American grandmasters of the shakuhachi. And so I studied with him at a camp, and he used to do annual concerts at Chicago Botanic Gardens. And I do some in-person lessons with him, but it's mostly Skype.
Very cool. Well, it's a really interesting sideline that you have there. And some other photos that came up in the slideshow show us that you have sort of a long and deep history in music. I know from talking to you that you played drums, but of course we see you playing saxophone as well in your early years. And I just have to ask about Bunyan Stew. That was the name of one of the groups that you played with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Bunyan stew. It does what, get people's attention. It's an unusual name, and it was a name my older brother came up with. Um, you know, we were listening to a lot of rock and roll, Rolling Stones and Cream and all that stuff during the 60s. And he started to research the roots of rock and roll. And that took him back to the original blues artists that, you know, the Rolling Stones and Alexis Corner Blues Band and some of those original uh, English artists we're listening to. And he had, you know, all these old albums of folk blues artists, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, and he had uh, been listening to an artist by the name of Lightning Hopkins, who was a country blues artist. He's, I don't know, been attributed as the greatest influence on rock and roll guitar. So if you're interested in rock and roll guitar, go listen to Lightning Hopkins. But he had a song by the name Bunyan Stew. And so Michael thought that'd be a good name for the group. And the rest is history, as they say.
It's definitely a memorable group name.
Yeah.
And I know from playing with you, Chris, one thing I've enjoyed as we've decided to work up new tunes in the band at the Lake House, you often have listened to many of the original works and have kind of encouraged us to get the chord changes right along those lines. And that's something that I've actually taken into my teaching somewhat too. Instead of just pulling a tune out of the real book, I like to go and listen to the original. In fact, a recent tune I did that with was Doxy, and the melody is not the same that Sonny Rollins plays as opposed to what's in the real book. So I've started sharing this new version as I've taught the tune with my students. So thank you for that history of looking deep for things and coming up with stuff like Bunyan Stew. So you're teaching online now, and obviously when things changed out, and how is that online instruction going for you?
Um, well, it's going well. I don't feel, again, it's there's nothing to replace the one-on-one um, lessons, you know, and especially in a wind instrument, just hearing, you know, an instrument in the room and sitting next to someone and being able to hear the sound. Um, but a kind of a compromise I've come up with is have my students send me recordings. So they make recordings of themselves, and then they send me an MP3 file. So I can listen to a quality recording that they've made um, before the lesson. And then I can provide feedback during the lesson and then, follow up with next week's recordings. During the lesson, there's, the technical limitations of sound delays. Sometimes when I'm having them play with the metronome, I actually hear the metronome accelerating and decelerating as the Zoom compression algorithms kick in. So, it's workable, I think, and I enjoy doing it, but it certainly presents challenges.
Yeah, I certainly share your feelings. And I attended a webinar early that coached us to adjust our expectations, and so I find myself constantly reminding myself that I probably am not hearing it as it's being played. But within that, kind of keeping that in mind, at least we're able to stay in touch with our students and everything. I share your feeling
Yeah.
for that. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me on this collaboration and hanging in there with the technical aspects. And everybody, we're going to still try to get the shakuhachi flute going and share the loon tune with you. And and so, thanks for being part of this, Chris.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bill, for has kind of given me a goal and organized a sense of purpose around my playing to just do something like this. And I really appreciate that connection.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, see you soon, Chris. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Well, I certainly can can agree with Chris. In fact, one of the purposes that I have for doing these concerts is to challenge myself and keep myself growing as a musician, but also just to have some time to collaborate with these people that previously I was able to collaborate with in real time all the time. So that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Thomas Power for working hard on his recording and again working through the technology with me to make it happen. And thanks for Chris Wren for doing the same. And I wish everyone will have a safe and meaningful Independence Day celebration. And peace and health to all. Bye now.